The First World War marked the beginning, the modern era. The era born in cauldron with gunpowder, toxic smoke, and blood. 10 million people with the blood that spilled from the fields of France to American waters. From the borders of Russia to sands of the Middle East. From China to the deepest seas and oceans. This war broke empires. It shattered the past and forced us to give up our last ties to our medieval understanding. When the smoke finally cleared and a stunned world crawled out of its trenches, a new era began with new types of energy, new ideas, and new terrors. This war is a defining event of the 20th century. It is the Great War. However, we will not talk only about the war. We will talk about events that preceded it. For if the war itself is the seminal catastrophe of the 20th century, then the weeks before the war are its seminal tragedy. We'll focus on the very human, very personal stories that led Europe to consume itself. It's real drama living out before us. It begins with the death of a prince and his lady and ends in mass slaughter which the world has never seen. While we are starting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That's how you can support me and don't miss new videos. Thank you, bro. Let's move on. At the time our story begins, it's important to remember Germany as a nation was only 40 years old. It's a young nation, a strong one, a nation looking to claim its own. For overnight, with the signing of a few papers, the middle of Europe was transformed from 1,000 tiny squabbling states to the greatest land power the world had ever known. In one night, suddenly the most powerful nations of Europe, Russia, France, Austria, Hungary, and England were not the most powerful nations in Europe any longer. Overnight, in the very heart of Europe, had been created a nation with more manpower, natural resources, and economic strength than any other nation in the world. Here they are, arguably the most powerful country in the world, and yet they see themselves being denied all the rights of a great world power. Britain and France held territories across the globe. Even the Netherlands, a nation which the might of the new Germany can wipe off the face of the earth in a week, had colonies from Asia all the way to Africa. But Germany, for all their strength, had been denied those possessions simply because their nation was young. In Russia, there was Tsar Alexander II, who understood that Russia needed to modernize to survive. He began dismantling serfdom, reformed the judicial practices, encouraged universities, and pursued peace, understanding that Russia was in no position to fight the major European powers. Like all the men here, this guy wasn't a pretty angel. Alexander II brutally suppressed revolutionaries and separatists in the territories Russia controlled. And he was really effective manager. By the 20th century, we have in Russia Nicholas II, a deeply reactionary, deeply conservative man who history records as being of middling intellect with neither the training nor the inclination to properly rule. His reign is a catalogue of embarrassing mismanagement. This is a man who couldn't even coordinate his own coronation. A man who let 1,300 people die in a human stampede on the day he was crowned because, I kid you not, there was not enough beer and pretzels. And this is the man who had a fate of Europe in his hands. Meanwhile, in Austria, we have as emperor an 84-year-old man. His foreign minister Berthold is neither a bad man nor a stupid man, but he is a weak and vacillating man at a time when European politics are all about strength. And what about Germany? Germany, during the 20 years following its creation, had one of the greatest diplomats the world has ever seen. Otto von Bismarck, the man whose life's work was to ensure that France and Russia never allied so that Germany would never be surrounded. He said that the great European conflagration would come from some damn fool thing in the Balkans. And Bismarck warned Kaiser Wilhelm that within 20 years his bellicose policies would destroy German Empire. And he was fired by Kaiser. Now to all this, we have to add one last piece: fear. The fear of the dying empires, the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Russian Empire. The Ottoman Empire was long known as the sick man of Europe. Its decline had been long and slow, with the surrounding nations taking bites out of its carcass as it slowly died. The Austro-Hungarian Empire looked at the fate of the Ottomans and saw shadows of what was to come. They had once been the most powerful state in Europe, but now their time had gone. The Russian Tsars ruled the largest country in the world, but like the Ottomans, Their military, economy, and infrastructure were woefully behind the times. And in 1905, when the Russians lost the war against the Japanese, the first time a European power had lost a war to an Asian one in modern history, their weakness became eminently clear to the world. This loss caused a revolution that forced the Tsar to accept the parliament and a constitutional monarchy. But Nicholas II didn't agree with new parliament, and he rebelled against these constraints, leaving his country precariously perched on the verge revolution. So with a new superpower in the midst of Europe, fear driving crumbling empires to irrational and desperate decisions, and a group of leaders simply not equal to their forebears at the task of guiding the ships of state. Let's continue. A group of young people are sitting in a cafe in Belgrade and reading a newspaper with heading Archduke Franz Ferdinand to visit Sarajevo on 28th of June. These people are nationalists, assassins, and patriots, and almost all of them are younger 20. They call themselves Mlada Bosna and want to get the independence from Austrian rule. Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria, next in line for succession to the throne, coming to Sarajevo on 28th of June. Day of all days falls on the anniversary of one of the greatest battles in Serbian history, the Battle of Kosovo. It's one of the great rallying points of the Serbian people, a point of national pride. To Serbian nationalists, this is one of their proudest days. And for them, the Archduke of Austria, the symbol of their oppression, the embodiment foreign rule to come here on that date, was the greatest insult. Maybe he simply didn't know that the day had any special importance. But whatever the reason, he was ill-informed. For on any other day, the events that are about to happen may not have happened. On any other day, this might have turned out simply to be your average parade, an event which wouldn't even go down as a historical footnote in a long and prosperous rule. This 28th day of June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand with his wife Sophia came to Sarajevo to watch the parade. But in fact, it was just an excuse. It was their anniversary. They've come to get away from the stifling courts of Austria, where the Archduke's marriage to Sophie will never be accepted due to her low birth. She was, after all, only a countess. So they sat in the sleek black car. The royal couple begins to process down the streets of Sarajevo, flanked by 5 other cars filled with officials and guards. It was a parade. The streets are lined with onlookers. The route has been published beforehand, and those young men from that cafe in Belgrade are there in that crowd. They came to kill Franz. One by one, the Archduke's car passes his would-be assassins. Nothing happens. 2 of his assassins ended up succumbing to fear and couldn't go through with the deed. But at last, on the Koprija Bridge, an assassin finally steps forward and throws a bomb at the Archduke's car. The bomb passes over him and bounces into the street behind. An explosion rips through the ground, mangling the car following them and leaving 20 people wounded on the street. The assassin leaps over the side of the bridge to make his escape, but in the type of amateurish planning that would be comical if the circumstances weren't so grave, he fails to realize that the river below is only 4 inches deep, and he hurts his leg in the fall. Then the assassin swallows the cyanide pill he's been carrying, a final, "you'll never take me alive" gesture. But it didn't kill him, just started vomiting in the river while the police strolled down to take him very much alive. The motorcade races back the way it came, sirens screaming, and the city begins to lock down. The Archduke decides not to hide. He decides to visit the hospital where the wounded were taken after the attack. The Archduke's driver came along with Franz for the trip. He was Austrian and didn't know the ways around Sarajevo. And so, as they're making their way through the city, the Archduke's driver makes a wrong turn onto Franz Joseph Street, a street named for the Archduke's father. But it was a wrong turn. And there was another assassin, Gavrilo Princip. Yes, right there in front of him, in the same open-top car, was the Archduke and his wife. The driver had taken a random wrong turn onto the street where was Gavrilo Princip, and their car had just stalled out trying to back up. He stands up, he pulls out his pistol, and he fires 2 shots that changed the world. Then he immediately was arrested by police. Franz Ferdinand and his wife died. It was an act that began one of the greatest war in history and brought to an end the world that everyone knew. This war would change the world. Wait for next video and find out how the world responded to this event. If you like the video, subscribe and write in comments which topics you want to see next. Thank you, bro.